Thanks for choosing to listen to this Late Night Linux Family podcast. We're only able to do this because of the people who support us. None of our shows are paywalled, but our Patreon supporters can get most episodes early and never hear any ads. Learn more at latenightlinux.com/support or support us by telling a friend or colleague about everything we do. Hello and welcome to episode 154 of Linux Dev Time. I'm Joe.
I'm Amalith.
I'm Kevin.
And I'm Andy.
Good to talk to you all again. I've found myself talking about irresponsible disclosure of vulnerabilities quite a lot recently on other shows. So I thought it might be interesting to talk to you lot about it. Have you noticed this recent trend of people not waiting, not properly doing responsible disclosure?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely noticed it with the Linux kernel stuff. There's been, probably 4 or 5 recently where they've been disclosed in a completely uncontrolled way and before patches are available to users of distros and all kinds of stuff.
I've seen a bunch of articles, I would say roughly recently, that do not look like proper disclosure, but I've never really been involved in either a proper disclosure vulnerability or, given one to me. So I don't have a lot of experience in that area.
Isn't it supposed to be relatively straightforward? You as a researcher or just a random person finds this vulnerability in some open source code or even proprietary code. You contact the maintainer of that code through secure channels or mailing lists or whatever it is, tell them about it, they fix it, they push out patches, having coordinated with all of the relevant distros and Stakeholders, yeah. And then it goes public and you get the glory for finding it. That's how it's supposed to work, right?
It's a little bit more like a negotiation process than you made it sound, right? So from the point of view of a maintainer, you're busy doing all of your stuff, and then someone contacts you and says, I found this thing. And what they need from you initially is acknowledgement that it's real, right? They need to make sure that they are going to get the credit eventually, right? Because they've done all this work. And they need reward for that. And generally as a maintainer, often what you're thinking is, I don't have time to check whether this is real or not, but I have to make time. Assuming you then do investigate, find that it's legitimate, you then need to negotiate timescales, right? So there are some norms for this. The norm for this has been 90 days from when you disclosed it before. If the maintainers of the software don't do anything about it, it's legitimate for you to just disclose it without it being patched. But actually, in reality, the process is much more of a negotiation, and it's like, okay, you've found something that's quite fundamental for us. It's going to take us longer than 90 days to fix it. How about you hold off your blog post, and then you hopefully come to a sensible agreement. But the critical part of it is that the security researcher is going to get the credit, and you're going to back them up that it was them that found the thing, right? And if that trust is there, then there is room for negotiation about that kind of thing.
And in some cases, it's not just that the researcher should get credit, it's that the entity that could give credit has said they would also give money. So they should also give that money instead of not giving the money and not giving credit.
Yeah, bug bounties we're talking about here.
Right. There's an agreement on both sides.
Absolutely. But although bug bounties exist, and I guess some people make money from it, it seems to me that the most important part is the credit, because being a security researcher, I'm not exactly sure where the money comes from, but I guess it's a lot about reputation.
Well, yeah, my understanding is in the security and InfoSec world, you build a profile for yourself and then you get hired to work on finding vulnerabilities internally for companies, for example.
Yeah, and that's all about your reputation as a company, and to get hired, presumably your reputation as an individual.
It also probably depends on the scale of the thing we're talking about, right? If you're finding a vulnerability in Chrome, that's very different from John Smith's GitHub program.
Yeah, I have actually got one CVE logged against one of my open source projects. It was logged in 2001 or something. It was a PHP plus SQL address book program that I wrote with one user, which was me. But someone found a SQL injection vulnerability in it, and it made its way into the CVE database. So I'm very proud of that.
Well, I thought you were going to say box stacker for a second.
So was I.
So far, box stacker is completely secure. It has no bugs.
Did you write that one in Rust?
No, it's written in terrible JavaScript, mostly by my children.
What could go wrong?
Yeah.
So I understand when there's a bug bounty and companies don't honor that, people have a bad experience once or twice, and then they say, well, I'm not going to do that anymore, and they just do public disclosure. That is understandable. I would still prefer they didn't, and we had a great debate about that on 2.5 Admins relatively recently, and I think I lost that debate. So there's that. But if there is no bug bounty, why are people doing this? Why are people not waiting to take the credit? Presumably because they're worried that someone else will take the credit before they do.
Yeah, it could be that, or it could be like there's probably the possibility that some of them just don't know. So for like a security researcher, right, that's not a valid excuse. Or at least I would say it's not. But I don't think it's uncommon for someone to run across something. They find a particular vulnerability, they might get excited, and they just go through their typical channels. They're like, what do? I file an issue on GitHub, or I find an email and I send out something to say, hey, I found something critical here. And then there might be some back and forth because you're initially pretty excited. Like, hey, I just found a vulnerability in something. Like, this is awesome. And the company or project or whatever it is may not think it's awesome. In fact, like the company or the project sometimes feels that more CVEs levied against something is a negative effect. So they might try to minimize this thing and either say it's not a real bug, it's not exploitable, we don't care, whatever it is, right? And then there's this kind of natural tension, and people might just be like, cool, I'm releasing this to the public because I found something that I think is awesome, and I'm going to, tell people about it. And that could either be because there's animosity towards the project. It could be because they just found something cool and they want to talk about it and they want to show people. It could be for like resume building. Like there's so many different reasons that somebody could be wanting to just like disclose something and not really think about the full ramifications of what they're doing.
One reason that I've heard is that people use modern tools, shall we say, to find these vulnerabilities. And they assume that if they found it with this modern tool, other people will have as well. And so there's no point trying to be secretive about it. Just put it out there into the world.
Yeah, I'm completely convinced that that's what's been going on recently. Probably that multiple people have found the same thing at the same time, and then it only takes one of them to leak it.
That's presupposing that it's legitimate, though, which in many cases it's not. So there's a few things I think when we talk about a security vulnerability. Not all vulnerabilities are equal, but there are some that might be a valid vulnerability or might be a valid bug, but is not a security vulnerability. There might be ones that are not exploitable. There might be there's all kinds of different dimensions in which you can grade something. And so even supposing that it's legitimate, even then the project or company may not classify it the same as somebody who found this, whether it be a tool or a person or whatever. And in those cases, I think it's probably just people trying to build a name for themselves or get a bunch of stuff on a resume, because there's no monetary incentive usually. And even if somebody else does find it, if it's not legitimate, then it doesn't really matter if someone else finds it first too. So it's just kind of a resume building thing of like, hey, I found this thing and I found it first, and I'm out there. But at the same time, like I also don't really feel that that's a resume builder if you just used a quote unquote modern tool to find the thing. So I don't know. I'm also not a security researcher.
It's funny that you said some bugs are not security vulnerabilities, but how do you know? Isn't the difference between a regular bug and a security vulnerability how creative you are at exploiting it?
Possibly.
Sometimes.
I would have to really give that some thought, but I am willing to bet that not all bugs are security vulnerabilities, as in there's nothing that could be gained from a security aspect of it. So there's no disclosure of sensitive information. There is no potential for unauthorized use or access. There is no, I guess, I don't even know what other categories are out there, but like I imagine there are a limited set of bugs that can lead to that sort of a thing. And in places like the Linux kernel, where they've just said all bugs lead to this, I think that's more one. I think it's kind of a middle finger to the numbering agencies, I guess. But it's also they're the kernel. There is nothing lower than them. So therefore, all all bugs could be a potential security bug, which is not the case for most applications, I would say.
So I think it is about what's exploitable, right? And what the exploit causes. So some bugs just don't offer an opportunity for someone bad to do something bad. And some bugs you didn't think they did, and then it turns out someone thought of a clever way of exploiting them. So I think imagination is part of the process here.
Yeah, and creativity and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Evil creativity.
And there are absolutely bugs that seem innocuous that can lead, when chained to other bugs, lead to these like just absolutely incredible chains that do lead to something security-wise. But I don't know that that is all bugs that can lead to that type of thing. Like, these are usually still pretty strict classes of bugs that lead to those types of chainable events, like writing to memory that you aren't really supposed to, or reading from memory that you're not supposed to. Like, there are usually things like that out there. There's also like other weird classes where there are sections of code that are not used or can be used to jump back and forth. Like, there are some really weird instances like that, but those I would say are not your typical bugs, but still the ones that lead to security events are pretty well scoped to some sets of primitives.
I think it might be worth reviewing, why does responsible disclosure exist? Why don't you just publish things? Because openness is good, right? It makes us all more secure. And why have we ended up with this 90-day window as a kind of norm? And I feel like it's worth talking about like what happens when you fix the bug. So we've talked a little bit about what happens when someone reports it and you negotiate like how long until we disclose this and stuff like that. But what often happens after that is when you find and fix the bug, hopefully that's relatively quick, which isn't always the case. But if it is, you then have a whole process, because the goal of the process is that at the time people become aware of the bug, they've already got the fixed version on their machine. And the reason for that is because it prevents harm, right? That's why it's called responsible disclosure, because it prevents people from being harmed, which would be irresponsible. And so actually to do that, to achieve that goal, it's actually quite difficult. Like you need to publish the release. And like, do you publish the release with release notes that don't properly describe it? And then update the release notes later after you've announced the vulnerability. You need to publish the vulnerability. So maybe you get an entry in CVE, but it's not public yet, and you make it public after you've released. But also your release as an upstream developer may not mean that it's actually on people's machines. So like you've got to talk to people from distros. You might need to talk to customers. Maybe you've got to deal with customers because they build on top of your thing. So now they need 48 hours to apply your patch onto their version of your code before their users have got it. So like the coordination process is like serious work, and it's not fun, but it's very important.
And it might be different for every project.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I mean, the Linux kernel, for example, someone recently described all the distros that use the Linux kernel. They're not actually using the Linux kernel, are they? Like Ubuntu, for example, effectively uses a fork of the kernel because they take the upstream, make their changes to it, and then publish it in the distro.
Yeah.
And so if there's a vulnerability in the Linux kernel, and so the kernel team pushes out a new kernel, well, that doesn't really help Ubuntu because they have to then look at all the changes and apply it to all the kernels that they are currently supporting. And so there has to be some coordination there between all the projects. And it's not just Ubuntu, right? I presume it's the same with loads of other distros.
And it's really difficult because then, like, how much effort does the Linux kernel project put into making sure that all of those distros understand what's going on? Do they secretly communicate with those distros? Well, that might be okay for the distros that they know and trust, but what if, like, someone sets up a new distro? Do they suddenly become a member of the security mailing list and find out about kernel vulnerabilities early? You know, it's complicated and difficult and human and process problem.
So when do you think a project should qualify for like this type of infrastructure and caring? Because maybe it's a hot take, but I would say 90+% of the projects on GitHub don't need this level of rigor.
Yeah, I think it's to do with how widely used you are and how security sensitive you are.
I mean, the upstart distros are a great example of this, or boutique distros, whatever. Like, if you've only been around for a year, do you count? I don't know. Like, you have to build up trust. I suppose it depends who you are. If it's a distro from someone who's got a good track record, then maybe after a few months or even less than that, they could be allowed in. But if it's someone who keeps making distros and disappearing, maybe not.
Yeah, that's why I say it's a very human problem, right? Like, it's all about human trust. So you got the question about, like, who would someone like my project trust downstream to reveal things early to those people? And then you've got who should users be trusting, you know? So when you get up into the tens of millions of users, if you make a web browser that's used by, say, 10 million people, at that point, in my opinion, it's part of the responsibility of you as that project to have a process for dealing with security vulnerabilities. Maybe 10 million is way too big, I don't know. But anyway, there definitely is a point after which the number of people using your thing means that you should be responsible for it, and the sensitivity of the thing you do. So obviously web browsers spend their whole time rendering web pages that are written by someone you may not trust, so they have a very strong responsibility to be secure and to have a good security process.
And then you've got bugs in applications where if the users are using like the Snap or the Flatpak, say, it's very easy to keep them up to date. But you get these projects where people are reporting bugs in ancient versions of their software that have been patched in the most recent one, but because this ancient version is in an LTS of Ubuntu or Debian stable or whatever, people are using this old buggy one. And that must be a nightmare as a developer and a maintainer.
Yeah, maybe like I'm just feeling super spicy today, but that's another one of those ones where as an upstream developer, once I've put out the release for my, like we've talked about the sort of release engineering and having supported versions and things of that nature. But for whatever my range of supported versions is, if I support and release a fix for all of those ranges, if there's a downstream consumer, not necessarily related to me, but consuming me for some really ancient version, I kind of feel that it's on that project to take the upstream patches for the supported version and backport if they care to do so. And I'm not saying it's not a hard problem. I'm not saying that it's easy in any way. Like humans are messy in general, but I do think that projects that support really old versions of stuff, once the developer has put out the new release for their supported versions, like that's kind of where the developer's portion or their obligation, I would say, ends. Not to say they can't do more. They could, and they could help.
Yeah, but this is one of the main reasons why Flatpak and Snap exist, is my understanding. Because developers want a like straight pipeline to their users. They kind of want to bypass the distros. And there are pluses and minuses there.
I'm not sure that things like Flatpak and Snap exist because of security vulnerabilities, except possibly in some exceptional projects like a browser. I think it's more about getting features to users. And I actually think the security model that there is doesn't work that badly. Like if you look at a distro like Debian that has ancient, well, not ancient anymore because Debian stable's not that old anymore. But anyway, relatively old versions of packages are available in Debian. And often, I'm not saying they're all patched, but I'm saying that the process for them to be patched is that the Debian maintainer will need to backport the patches if it's not supported by the upstream developers. And I think that's a good and right process.
Definitely, but it seems from my experience that they very much prioritize security issues, and some bugs don't get fixed because they're not considered to be security issues.
Definitely. And I agree with that approach. I think that's exactly the right approach.
Well, yeah, if you've got limited resources and you've only got time to fix some, then obviously you want to prioritize the security stuff. But it must be very frustrating for the developers and maintainers to see these old versions that have bugs in them not getting patched.
Especially when users are reporting those bugs back to the upstream.
Yeah, exactly.
It's painful to receive those bug reports, but I feel like it's less painful once you realize that it's not your responsibility, right? Like as an upstream developer, if that is a bug against an old version, it might make you feel bad that that bug's still out in the world. But, you know, like use a more modern version or get your distro person to fix the bug.
The user chose to use that LTS. They are getting the long-term supported version of your software. And if it's not being supported by the person who said they would support it, maybe that person should support it.
Yeah, like if you're getting abuse for this as an upstream developer, that's horrible, and I totally disagree with that. But if you're just feeling bad that the bug still exists in the world, I don't know, maybe get over it.
Yeah, but users don't necessarily understand the whole model of LTSs and everything, right? Like all they know is I've got Ubuntu 24.04, 26.04, and I installed this thing and there's a bug in it. I'm reporting it to you and you're telling me you won't fix it. you're telling me it's not my problem. But, if it's in this particular bit of software, it's hard for that user or some users to understand that it is ultimately Ubuntu's problem.
Maybe it's hard for them to understand, but essentially they've logged the bug in the wrong place, right? So they should log it in the other place. It's not that hard to understand. I mean, the fact that they've actually reported a bug is in itself showing quite a level of sophistication, right? Probably they're just whinging about it on social media.
Well, yeah.
Well, then you have the different repositories, whether it be, I can't remember how Ubuntu does it with World and Universe, and like some things are supported, but then other things are not. So I can see it does get very convoluted for the user who's ultimately just like, I want the thing to work, please.
Yeah, and with Universe, it depends, like, are you on Ubuntu Pro? Are you not on Ubuntu Pro? It does get complicated.
This is what led me to ditch Ubuntu, right? I feel like it's kind of irresponsible what they've got, which is that they grab all of these packages, stick them in Universe so you can have them very conveniently, but then they're not updated. And then they do have this paid service where a very small number of them are updated. But if you're on Debian Stable, those things may be updated by the maintainer because that's the maintainer's job, the package maintainer. But on Ubuntu, they're just kind of abandoned and left dangling until the next release.
Really is a hot takes episode, this one, isn't it? So I suppose the conclusion is it's hard. Like all things with software development, computers, IT, and people in general. It's complicated, it's messy, and everyone is trying to do their best. And sometimes their best isn't as good as other people hope it could be.
And it's all a massive people problem. And to be fair, it's also a process problem, right? You need processes in order to marshal people, but at its core, it's people.
But if people won't follow the accepted processes, then what can you do? It must be a nightmare as a project. You've got this process in place. People use the modern tools to find a vulnerability and then just do a blog post, stick it on GitHub with a working exploit. I mean, that must be just the nightmare scenario.
Go read the curl blog.
Well, yeah, and we didn't even get into being flooded with supposed reports that are actually just completely made up. Sometimes they're like a slight bug. Sometimes they are a security bug, but 9 times out of 10 or more than that, it's just complete horseshit, basically.
But like our whole society depends on people behaving reasonably. You can mess up your neighborhood in real life by doing all kinds of things, even things that are not illegal. You can just like make people's lives a total misery by just being horrible, right? So don't do that in real life. Don't do it in security research.
Take your trolley or shopping cart back. Don't just leave it in the car park.
Sorry, Dad.
Right, well, we better get out of here then. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, but until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Amalith.
I've been Kevin.
And I've been Andy.
See you later.